Hello, guys, or whoever is here. Today's topic is behavioral assessment. And what we are going to look at the definition of, going to describe the categories of behavioral assessment, explain what what functional behavioral assessments are. We're going to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of the case studies or the case history methods. We're going to talk about the different types of case history methods. We're going to talk about interview as a method of assessment. We're going to explain the purpose of interview methods, and we're going to elucidate the types of interviews. And last but not the least, we're going to analyze other methods of assessment in behavioral category. This is your unit 3 of your last block in personality. So what exactly is behavioral assessment? Behavioral assessment is a systematic study and evaluation of any individual's behavior techniques, including direct observation, interviews, and self-monitoring. When used to identify patterns, it indicates of disorders, and the procedure is called behavioral diagnosis and is very essential in deciding upon the use of specific behavioral or cognitive behavior interventions. That means after you get an assessment, it is when you can decide what technique you need to use in order to help your client. Behavioral assessment, in simple terms, refers to assessing and measuring various constituents of behavior that are indicative of a way or of why a certain behavior, feeling, or and how they're controlled. That means that it suggests what kind of a behavior a person is going to have in a particular situation, or what kind of feel particular situation, or how they think in a particular situation, and what controls that particular situation. And the controlling, it also describes the controlling variable that could be both from within the person and outside the person. That means internal or environmental. We are going to then talk about the theoretical model underlying the application of behavioral assessment procedures. The theoretical underpinnings of the concept of behavioral assessment stem from the interaction between a person's previous learning and the external and organismic environments within which a person functions. That means it talks about the internal structure of the person as well as the environment around him, due to which the person acts in a particular way. And this is what is studied by behavioral assessment. It is the setting in which the behavior occurs. The setting in which a behavior occurs is of a primary importance. Now, where it is occurring, where all the behavior is occurring, or in which setting it is occurring, is also a very important point that we need to consider. Okay, the biological makeup and this physiological functioning help the individual to adapt and respond to the environment. We are also talking about evaluating behavior. Evaluating behavior requires assessment to the person, the setting, and the interaction between the two. That means we're talking about a person and his environment. We're going to study the person, the environment, and the bond that is happening, or the interaction between the environment as well as the person. Setting refers to the environmental circumstances which influence the occurrence of behavior. Environmental circumstances in immediately and after and forming the behavior. behavior. That means that it is before, as in the condition before the behavior happens, during the behavior, and behavior that follows after the incident happens. Suppose, say, a person, suppose Mr. X was scolded by his boss in office, and he had a very bad drive back to home. He'll come and he'll yell at the wife, even if she tries to say hello. And later on, if he realizes that he's done a mistake at that point of time, he'll either go say sorry, or if that irritation continues, or if that continues, he will be very adamant. Common characteristics and assumptions of behavioral assessment method. First thing is they're all focused on behavior. All these assessments that we do are focused on behavior. It can be implicit or explicit, right? Overt or covert behavior, both are measured. That means behavior that cannot be observed by us or is constantly observed by us, both are measured and evaluated. As I said, behaviors are observed. Variables and concepts are taken up objectively. All behavior, okay. Variables and concepts in the sense, if again talking about the situation which we are in, or talking about a situation which has brought up that particular behavior is a variable, right? The screaming of the boss or the reprimanding of the boss of an employee is variable. It will depend on whether the person has done the right thing or if the boss's boss has screamed on him, right? So we take it objectively. We do not judge the boss for screaming on the employee. All behavioral assessment methods believe in quantification. Behavior is quantified so as to allow for reliable comparisons across time and people, and to allow for communication between persons. That means it talks about the amount of behavior is quantified as to allow for reliable comparison across time. That means we are going to take the same situation at different points of times, right? On the time scale, and we're going to see how the person's reacted at different points of time. The reliability of the person behaving in the same way helps us understand how this person is at every point of time. Okay, it will also quantify the type of behavior that he has. Leads to greater objective of information. I'm really sorry, I think I've lost touch. Okay, all the behavioral assessment methods are used. Just a second. Okay. All the behavioral assessment methods used are used by trained and impartial observers. That means the observers, or us as counselors, clinical psychologists, or anybody who's doing the course that we are, these people are trained in using various measurement techniques of behavioral assessment, and they record and they're very much trained in recording the information and collecting the information as an objective observer. That means they do not have their own, they're not biased towards the answers that are obtained, right? Okay, all of them use empirically validated measures. It is important to have consistency in the measurement across situations. The measures should be empirically validated. That means the information that we have must be verifiable. If it is not verifiable, it is mostly inaccurate. All of them recognize, the fifth point is that all of them recognize errors and try to counteract the error or minimize the errors to the extent possible using statistical methods. All assessments have varying degrees of errors, causing unreliability of the results. Hence, it is important to minimize the errors, and that is generally carried out through statistical techniques. Now, remember yesterday's class, we were talking about how to reduce the faking of the answers. It was very important here as well, because if in case we get fake answers, it means our evaluation or assessment is also wrong. All of these believe that behavior concerned occurs due to the stimuli from the environment. Directed towards, that means the behavior is directed towards discovering, or the assessment is directed towards discovering the situational influence on behavior, emphasis on public events, and direct observation of behavior in natural environment. This is what your assessments are focused on. Behavior is recorded at the time of occurrence. All these assessment techniques depend not on one, but multiple sources of information, which are wide range which means it comes through wide range of strategies, and the different strategies that are used are behavioral interviews, checklists, rating scales, standardized instruments, self-reports, self-monitoring forms, observation. And apart from these, there's also no adequate information as to why behavior occurs. Apart from that, means even after taking an assessment or a behavioral assessment, it is not 100% sure as to why a behavior occurs. It can give you only an estimate or a proper suggestion, but it is not exactly sure as to why it happens. All behavioral assessment techniques ultimately place high emphasis on intervention. Purpose of assessment is to obtain information that will assist in developing effective intervention strategies. In effective intervention strategies, the emphasis on intervention results in the application of behavioral assessment model to the particular person, situation, etc. All the behavioral assessment techniques use continuous assessment. That means assessment in a continuous I'm really sorry, the laptop is getting a little stuck. Assessment is continuous throughout the baseline, intervention, and follow-up phases. Effectiveness is continuously evaluated. Am I audible? Hello?
We lost you there.
Where exactly?
Just after the laptop is stuck. Continue from
Sorry. I don't think then you missed much. Okay, yeah. Assessment is continuous throughout the baseline, the baseline, intervention, and follow-up phases. That means assessment goes through that. No? The baseline is obtaining information, intervention is to see if we can stop the particular behavior, and follow-up phases is where you go back and see if the particular situation that has previously caused the behavior has ceased to cause that behavior after the intervention. Effectiveness is continuously evaluated. That means you follow up on the person that you're taking care of. Each of these behavioral assessment techniques emphasizes on empirically based decision-making process. Specific assessment strategies and interventions are based on empirical data available of the individual concerned from the person's self and the environment in which the person lives. That means all the information that is required in order to conduct a particular assessment or a particular intervention is done by collecting proper empirical evidential data about the person and the environment around them. Most of these behavioral assessment techniques focus on individual person rather than a group. That means, as it clearly mentions, you talk about or talk to a single person. You do not want to focus on a group because it is not as effective if you're doing it with a group than rather you would rather do it with a person. It is more effective that way. High emphasis is placed on individual differences. Individual differences among people are not absolute. All behavioral assessment techniques not only look for causes contributing the problem, but also try to solve the problem concerned once the cause is known. That means every assessment that you're taking or the technique that you're using, it is not looking only for the cause that is aggravating the problem, but it is also trying to look for a solution within the problem itself. The purpose of assessment is problem solving, and hence identification of the cause is extremely important. All the behavioral assessment techniques focus on developing adaptive behavior in the individual. Behavioral assessment is on developing adaptive, positive, or desirable behavior rather than on control or reduction of undesirable behavior. Again, we've gone through the process, right? Positive reinforcement or positive punishment, things like that, right? You're going to award or show a little more desirability towards the required behavior, and when you show no interest towards the undesirable behavior, the person who's doing it generally tends to stop. The advantages of behavioral assessment is that it provides objective data for deciding specific instructional content and strategies for intervention. Behavioral assessment leads directly to the formulation of intervention strategies. Behavioral assessment can be undertaken in the setting in which the concerned behavior occurs or in stimulated conditions resembling the natural situations. That means you're creating a virtual reality kind of a thing, right? So for this particular thing, if you look into veterans abroad or in India, they use simulations in order to get them over PTSD. So immersive kind of therapy, right? Something called as an immersive therapy, if I'm not wrong. You put them back in the same kind of a situation in order for them to get over it. Immersing them back into that problem situation helps them understand it better, that they're not threatened, or it is okay to feel threatened, but you'll have to move on, sort of a thing. Behavioral assessment is tailored to the unique characteristics of the referred person and the targeted environment. So when you're talking about behavioral or you're talking about a client that has come to you, so whatever assessment you are going to provide to them or whatever intervention you want to give to them, it is going to be custom fit to the person that is coming to you. The continuity of behavioral assessment facilitates determining the progress and evaluation of the outcome. Behavioral assessment has such a variety of technique that these help in multifaceted assessments. That means if a person is depressed, also is very anxious, and he's bipolar, and multiple issues are there, your behavioral assessments talks about all these particular behaviors as well, all these particular traits or characteristics or issues as well. It will attack the problem from multiple angles. Most behavioral assessment techniques can be implemented by anyone with sufficient training and does not require an advanced degree. So if a person is trained enough to provide this particular assessment, it is more than enough. However, as it is both sides of a coin, when there are advantages, there is also disadvantages. So the disadvantages of behavioral assessment is that the methodology is not standardized. There is not one particular method you can follow in order to get perfect results. Different levels of specification of the concerned behavior may result in inconsistent data. So if you're not able to get enough information, or the level of difficulty of the assessment or the level of accuracy of the assessment is lacking, then the information that you obtain is also on the lacking side. Narrow definitions of behavior may result in less consistency in behavioral observation. So if the definitions given to a particular behavior are not defined properly, so the minute you try to observe these kind of definitions, you might overstep into a different kind of a behavior and misjudge the particular behavior. The methodology may appear easy to apply. However, if a psychologist is not trained in the technique, the assessment will be defective, and consequently, the intervention will also be ineffective. Meaning that if you're not properly trained, or if suppose a Dr. X or Mr. X is not properly trained in this particular assessment type, that means if he doesn't have enough experience with this particular type of assessment, and he interprets in a very wrong way, then the intervention that you're going to give your client is also faulty. Functional behavioral assessment. Functional behavioral assessment, or the FBA, is an attempt to look beyond the obvious interpretation of behavior as bad and determine what function it may be serving for the individual. So suppose, say, a person does something wrong, but for him it might not feel wrong. It is more a coping method. Then the way the person interprets, or the way you interpret the behavior, shouldn't be judgmental types. It should be more of an understanding towards what the person has faced in order to be doing such a kind of a bad thing. Okay, we won't term it as bad. Okay, the process usually involves documenting the individual's behavior in different situations, interviewing the family members, and obtaining information about the behavior of the individual. If necessary, getting information from their workplace regarding the behavior of the individual, and many other related sources. So if the information that you get directly from the person or the individual is not enough, and you'll start interviewing their family, their friends, and you'll try to get their information from every reliable source that you find. And even if you're not able to get enough information from the people around him, you'll start going to their workplace and try finding out stuff about them from their workplace. All done by behavioral specialists based on which the intervention is planned and drawn. So after collecting every possible information that you have, a behavioral specialist comes down and formulates a plan for the intervention. Behavioral assessment provides information that typically cannot be obtained from traditional assessment, but which is necessary for establishing effective remedial strategies and intervention for problems exhibited by an individual. Reliability and validity issues in behavioral assessment. Guys, if you have any doubt, please let me know. Guys, all sleeping?
No,
Yes,
we are
yes.
awake.
Yes. Who was that?
Me.
Mimi, who?
Srivalli.
Oh, okay, understood.
No. I was about to ask you if you were at the end of the unit, just let us know.
No. I'm not even halfway through.
Okay, great.
Reliability and validity issues in behavioral assessment. Reliability in behavioral assessment refers to the agreement between observers viewing the same behavior at the same point of time. That is inter-rater reliability. or by a single observer observing the same behavioral sequence at different occasions. So there are two different situations. Two people observing the same person at the same time, or a single person observing the same person at different points of times of the same behavioral surroundings or situation. Validity in behavioral assessment refers to the data obtained from one measure being predictive of the behavior obtained through other measures in different settings, under different conditions, at different times, or by different observers. Here, what it means is validity. So what are they talking about? The information that you have, with all the information that you have, you're forecasting or predicting the kind of behavior that you expect in different types of situations under different conditions. It can be done at the same time, or at different times, or by different people. So you're trying to check whether if suppose there are different observers, you're trying to see if their observations of the client is the same at whatever interval that you're talking about. So if there are two people who are observing, you want to see if both the observers are getting the same data. If they are getting the same data, that means whatever assessment that you've taken is valid. If not, it is not. Multifaceted assessment is the rule in behavioral assessment, and each of the assessment procedures utilized should be should provide equivalent data. That is convergent validity. That means no matter how many different types of assessment you provide to the person that your client, the results should be the same. That means it should yield the same result. That is convergent validity. That means it is coming to a point, right? All the assessments give the same result. Other important considerations with respect to the validity in behavioral assessment is the extent to which information gathered through multifaceted assessments lead to beneficial treatment outcomes. That is treatment validity. So depending on the type of behavioral assessment you're taking, you're going to plan your intervention or your treatment in that way. So if your treatment is going in a positive direction, then it is obvious that your multifaceted assessment is leading to a beneficial treatment. Uses of behavioral assessment. So what is behavioral assessment used for? It is used to screen, it is used to identify problems, it is used for analysis, selection of a good intervention program, and to know how far the intervention has been effective in resolving a particular problem. Assessment will be done in order. It is when and where you should do this. Will be done in order to know if the treatment has been administered and how well it is being done. Sorry. Okay, can you hear me? Guys? Am I audible?
Yes, Vasudha, carry on.
Okay, thank you. Assessment is done in order to check whether there is a change in behavior and if it has been monitored and documented. If change has occurred, has it been demonstrated that it is due to the treatment? That means you're trying to find out whether the change in behavior of the person is because of the treatment. You're trying to find out if the treatment cost has been assessed and has been decided whether the benefit is cost effective. Because if for a treatment you're going to spend cost, here doesn't exactly mean monetary. It is also going to talk about the time and the energy that you've invested in it, right? So it is trying to talk about cost effectiveness, meaning how much energy, if you have spent, is it worth the energy that you have given? It is also talking about the decision that has been made about modifying the treatment or maintaining the treatment. If there's a gain in it, right? So has a decision been made about modifying the treatment or maintaining treatment gains if desired outcome has been achieved? Types of assessment. There are 5 types of assessment, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, 5 types of assessment. They are direct assessment. So you're recording the behavior. It is the recording of a behavior that is done as it occurs in a situation. So you're watching it live and you're recording it live. Analog assessment, it involves measuring of behavior under simulated conditions, as at times the behavior may not occur in natural conditions. Okay, so for example, in role play, an example for analog assessment is role play. Indirect assessment, here the behavior is not observed but inferred through retrospective analysis. Idiographic is assessment, describing the behavioral characteristics of an individual of the individual concern. That is, you're talking about your client. So a child with ADHD, the assessment is disorder focused. The contextual assessment, it is where the stimuli in the environment causes the behavior. Okay, the stimuli in the environment that causes the behavior are in the focus in this particular assessment. So this method of assessment uses the stimuli, or it is trying to look at the stimuli that is causing the behavior. The main tool of behavioral assessment is functional analysis. Behavioral problems were to be defined through triple response mode, that is motor, cognitive, physiological, diverse potential causes, and multi-causality. Example, a person with depression should be defined through 3 different types, right? Your cognitive, that is your feeling of loneliness, attention deficiency, and concentration problems. Psychological, physiological is sleep deprived, and your motor is where there's a low rate of social behavior and physical activity. So your behavior, motor behaviors are lacking. This is your 3-dimensional or your 3-response mode. The problem can be explained functionally by several conditions of the subject, that such as reinforcement system deficit, inadequate motivational system or personal condition, dysfunction in biological conditions. Behavioral assessment provides the basis for behavioral changes, and the behavioral change requires treatment, and the treatment demands experimental manipulation and evaluation. The process of behavioral change, assessment, treatment, and evaluation, this is what we're going to discuss now. Important features of behavioral assessment is its role in behavior modification or behavioral change. To change a person's behavior, there are certain things that can be done. So you make an assessment as to why the behavior is occurring. And after the assessment is made, the cause is known. You know why the behavior is happening or what causes the behavior. And you can formulate your intervention or your treatment intervention, and you can formulate and you can evaluate whether the intervention that you have been using so far or they have been using so far has given you a desired change or not. Behavioral assessment has several challenges to face, and it is presently applicable only in the clinical field. Behavioral assessment needs measurement instruments and improved measurement devices. Assessment involves a process of decision making that is well known in terms of operations undertaken. That means if you know your assessment has been correct or your decision has been correct depending on the assessment results, right? Again, we have different types of assessment, right? Methods in which we do our assessments. One is your case study method. It is one of the most important types of research method in which which is non-experimental or descriptive research, right? Case study is a non-experimental or a very descriptive research. It is one of the it is one way of organizing social data for the purpose of viewing reality. It tends to preserve the unitary character of the social object being studied and tends to examine a social unit as a whole. For example, of a unit, a person or a family or a social group or a social institution or even a community. These are all what you call a social group. Detailed study of a single individual's behavior over an extended period of time is called a case history, a case history or a case study. This is mostly used in clinical and medical settings in order to diagnose and treat people who have psychological problems. Case histories usually deal with abnormal or troubled people who live, whose lives are studied during psychotherapy or diagnosis. A clinician seeks to achieve an understanding of the person's life's experiences and behavior patterns through a variety of procedures, including a person's own recollections, interviews with others who are known to the person, such as family, friends, colleagues, and all. Autobiological and biological documents and any available information from psychological tests. So you're trying to know about this person, you're trying to understand the person's experiences and all that through every possible source that you have, that is friends, family, themselves, their social media, their documentation of themselves, the TAT type of assessment, your Rorschach test, all these things give you a particular idea as to what the person is. Case histories by clinicians working with patients have played an important role in developing or in the development of certain personality theories and clinical thinking in general. Purpose of case study. What does case study do, or how does it help you? It is to understand the important aspects of the life cycle of a unit. That means how, as I said, what is a unit? A unit is a person, a family, a social group, a social institution, or even a community. So you're trying to look at the life cycle of this particular unit. Analyze deeply and interpret the interactions between the different factors that influence change or growth of that particular unit. It is a longitudinal approach which studies the unit over a period of time. The case studies are not confined to the study of individuals and their important behavioral characteristics. And the case studies can be made for all types of communities and all types of individuals. Though case studies or a case study is defined, though a case study is a detailed description and analysis of particular individuals' personalities, it is also immensely important research strategy. As we all know, this is one of the types of research strategies. Case studies are not confined to the study of an individual and their important behavioral characteristics. And a case study can be made for all types of communities and all types of individuals, as I said. I think I've repeated the particular statement. Okay. Case studies suggest deep insight about human behavior, but usually one case study does not provide a firm basis for deriving general principles of a behavior. Guys, give me a second, please. Sorry. The laptop is stuck again. Oh. Okay, so as I said, a case study provides deep insight about human behavior, and one case study doesn't provide all the information that you need. You'll have to do much more, and it is Okay. If a member of a case of case studies are not accessible for scrutiny, or that is interviews and other types of assessment, research may be able to identify threads of constituency among them and draw some general conclusions. So even if, suppose, say you're talking about case studies of 100 different individuals, and one of them at some point of time refuses to do so, you can still form a connection between the other 99 and come to a general conclusion about this one person who's saying, no, I won't do it anymore. Case study method may also be used to study the lives of normal individuals. It does not have to be of people who are troubled. It can be of normal people as well. Sorry. Now, there are different types of case studies. At least we're going to talk about two different types of case studies. One is an individual case study and the other is a community case study. An individual case study is where the social unit, the social unit where it is one person. The social unit is one person or one individual. Analysis in this type of a case study is done in depth. So you go extremely deep about this person and find out everything that you know about him in order to get the case study complete. In community case study, the community case study is where the social unit does not consist only of one person, rather it is more of a family or a social group or an institution. Such case study is a thorough observation and analysis of a group of people who are living together in a particular geographical territory. So if you're talking about a group of people, or you're doing a case study of a particular group of people, it is mostly during in a specific geographical territory. Suppose you're trying to look at the living conditions of people in Kashmir. So you're going to take a sample of one particular geographical location, right? One street or one place, and then you're going to try to do it. Community case study tries to deal with different elements of the community life, such as location, prevailing economic activity, climate, natural resources, historical developments, social structures, life values, health and education, and the stuff like that. On the basis of the purpose of a case study, on the basis of the purpose, a case study may be subdivided into two different categories. A deviant case analysis or isolated clinical case analysis. A deviant case analysis is where the researcher starts with the difference already found between two people, two groups, or two communities, and his task is to read backwards and deduce the condition that might have produced difference. So suppose, say, I and another friend of mine had a fight. The case study is going to start from, okay, these two people had a fight. Okay. Recently I was studying Harry Potter. So then, and in a deviant case analysis can be the fight between Dumbledore and Grindelwald. And the person who's doing this deviant case studies tries to find out as to why they had a fight and why Dumbledore was forced to kill Grindelwald or forced to dominate over Grindelwald. This is where a deviant case analysis comes in. Isolated clinical case analysis is where the emphasis is upon the individual units with respect to some analytical problems. So why I have done a mistake in telling you about some particular information is what this particular thing is trying to find. So suppose, say, I have given you a wrong example of a certain concept. Then the isolated clinical case analysis is trying to dig as to why I did that particular mistake only. Some strengths and weaknesses of case studies. The case study method, the advantages of it is that it provides an account of the complexities and idiosyncrasies of an individual's personality that is not possible for another strategy. Okay, we can also learn how a person copes with their life experiences, and also it is the only way where rare instances of a phenomenon can be studied. So suppose I have a spurt of brilliance only for a say a few couple of years, and then I'm stupid before that and after that. For example, this is the only way that a person can find out why I was brilliant only for that particular time and why I was very bad before and after that. Disadvantages of a case study. The researchers can never be totally certain about the cause and effect relationship. So what caused it and what effect it had cannot be totally certified, or it cannot be, a person cannot be very sure about it. You cannot control the factors that might affect the events or outcomes that may be that the person has observed. So you cannot say that, no, this event cannot happen now, so I'm not going to look at it. No, you'll have to look at every aspect. A case study examines only one person. It results in limited generalizability. That means a case study is more specific than general. You cannot say that a case study of me or a case study of, say, Mr. X can give a general information on the whole community. This person can be a deviant from the particular community, and you cannot call his characteristics the characteristics of everybody else in that community. The data obtained by case study or case history method may be retrospective or second-hand in nature, and thus distorted by time. So if you see, suppose say your great grandfather was a freedom fighter, or you have experienced, someone has experienced a very mesmerizing event, or why all that. When you're playing this particular game called Chinese Whisper, you're trying to tell something from one person to another. By the time it reaches the fifth person, the idea or the concept in that statement is lost. So I'll say Ritu is a very good person. The person will say the Ritu has a very good person. The word itself changes. The entire thing changes. Or the person will say Ritu is a very good artist. Something like that, no? The entire thing changes. And by the time it reaches the last person, it will be Ritu has something. Nobody knows what. This is how information is distorted from by second-hand information, or it is distorted through time. Even if the accuracy of such data can be verified, the conclusions drawn about the individual may reflect personal biases and of the investigator. So suppose that I'm investigating a certain situation. If the thing is very close to heart, or suppose I'm investigating about a person who has adopted many dogs or something, no? Or something like that. So my bias has a huge role in the conclusions drawn, even if the information that has been passed on by this person is true. Suppose say I know a person who's adopted 50 dogs and taken care of them. And I'm very biased to this person because I really like the fact that he has taken care of so many dogs. I will exaggerate the information that he's given me. Even though I know it is true, I will over exaggerate it just to make it look like as if he's a much better person. Or if suppose someone say they hurt a dog, I'm going to make him look very, very bad if I'm trying to write a report on him. Because even though he has hurt a dog, I'm going to make him look very bad because my personal bias is against the cruelty towards that dog. A case study can be considered as a preliminary research strategy that can offer intriguing hypotheses about human personality. This means it is only, so after you've finished a case study, it is preferable that you go ahead and do further research on this particular concept that you're doing your case study on. because it is very limited when you're doing case study, because it is going to give you only a certain amount of information, not all information. No matter how much case study you do, it is going to give you only basic information. Researchers can examine these hypotheses with more rigorous experimental procedure. So if I'm talking about, say, ice cream makes a person happy. This is the case study of 50 people who says that my cortisol level has dropped, my dopamine level has increased after eating an ice cream. But it is only saying a very small part of the information. But why it is doing so? Why is the dopamine such a good thing? Or why is cortisol such a bad thing? Cannot be given to us by a case study. So what we have to do is we have to put these people under rigorous experimental procedures to find out what exactly the cortisol does and what exactly the endorphins or the dopamine does. Interview method is a second type of your behavioral assessment method. It is where it is, okay. First of all, we're going to discuss the meaning and purpose of interview methods. It is one of the oldest and most widely used methods of collecting information about a person. A personologist obtains information from a person, from the person being evaluated, by asking him relevant questions and listening to the answers. Research interview aims at gathering information about a person concerning specific research topics under investigation. So I'm talking about dopamine and cortisol again. You're trying to ask them questions which actually trigger these effects, right? The cortisol effect or the dopamine effect or the endorphin effect, in order for getting answers in that particular interview. A clinical interview has its goal, that is the diagnosis of a patient's problem and the type of therapy technique that may be most appropriate for the given diagnosis. So when you're trying to, when a clinical psychologist is taking an interview, their main focus is the diagnosis of the patient and the problem that they're facing, right? And they're going to try, with the answers obtained, they're going to try to find out what treatment can be given. Interviews are used to measure specific aspects of personality. Psychoanalysis uses one type of interview to probe supposedly underlying aspects of personality. In modern research, special types of interviews in which individuals are asked questions assumed to be related to a specific trait. There is a variety in the degree to which the interviews may be structured or unstructured. So there are two different types of interview methods. In a structured interview, the questions are very carefully formed, carefully worded in order to, in order to get particular information. So it is very skillfully presented in a prescribed order. So for those of you, let's move on. In an unstructured interview, questions are framed in such a way as to allow the person to be considerably latitude in his response. That means it is okay. He is talking about himself. We're getting information, but we're in no hurry to get the information that we need. He can take his own time to do so. And that is why your questions are very unstructured. And it is basically to build a rapport between you and your client. The respondent is free to reveal whatever information he desires to such questions. In an unstructured interview, it is a more apt in following the personality. Unstructured interview is more apt in allowing the personologist more flexibility to probe the respondent's thoughts and feelings in the context of give and take exchange. So you, again, as I said, you're trying to build a rapport with your client. Strengths and weaknesses of your interview methods. Now we're going to talk about the strengths. When used by an extremely skilled interviewer, it can produce extremely valuable information regarding the individual's personality and their life situations. So if I'm not experienced in asking questions, if I ask a particular question that I think that I've heard an experienced interviewer asks, I might not get the same answer as he would or she would. Okay, the ability to communicate effectively with another, with others, the perceptions of self and significant others, the level of anxiety, the plans for future, the job satisfaction are few examples of data that can be obtained from a conducted interview. So from a structured interview, okay, I can't exactly call it structured. Even through unstructured interview, you can get these particular information, but it has to be conducted in a very precise and a crisp manner in order to get the information of all things above, like job satisfaction, significant others, level of anxiety, what plans the person has for his future. A well-planned interview can also be profitably used in hypothesis testing research. Issues of reliability and validity may arise in the event that the respondents are free to say about their past and present life experiences. So you do not know exactly how true this person is telling you, right? Like suppose I'm your client. I might not exactly tell you about my past life or whatever is happening in my present in certain cases. But again, a very skillful and a very experienced interviewer can draw that out of me very quickly. Properly structured questions asked of the person is an option to make the interviewer's information more valid and reliable, and if preferred in research settings. As I said, a more skillful person with a properly organized or structured questions can obtain the information that I'm trying to avoid giving. Unstructured questions are preferred by clinical psychologists and therapeutic settings. Interview techniques provide a rich source of personal data because we're building a rapport. With rapport, you get more information, and this is which is mostly subjective and may reflect a theoretical biases of the interviewer. So when you're conducting an interview, the information that you're getting from your client can be misinterpreted because of the bias that the interviewer is having. Personality of an interviewer can also highly influence the information disclosed and the truthfulness of the content, resulting in distorting or withholding information. It might not be an apt example, but I'll tell you how an interviewer can be. So I took Scooby to the vet, and normally with the vets that are there, he's very aggressive. But there's this one vet where he actually willingly goes to. So when we were discussing with the person who's taking care of Scooby at that point of time, she says that maybe he feels the rest of the vets are more, scary and non-approachable. But because she is more approachable, Scooby is more free to come to her. This is a normal example of how, what I'm trying to explain here is how an interviewer should be. They should look approachable. They should feel like the interviewee should feel more open to discuss with them. If you're going in there with an authority kind of an environment around you, the interviewee might not exactly give you the information that you want. But if you go in with a friendly, trusting kind of an environment around you, or that energy around you, the interview is definitely going to give you all the information that you need. When supplemented, an assessment interview by more objective sources of data is one of the most basic and indispensable of all assessment techniques. Other measures that can be used are, apart from the previous methods that we've mentioned, that is your case studies and your interviews, there exists less significant techniques to assess personality. Experience sampling methods is one of the methods where the interviewers could at random times or predetermined times call up the interviewee and obtain descriptions of their behavior. This could reveal much about the stable patterns of the individual behavior, which contribute contribute an important aspect of personality. Biological measures, positron emission tomography or PET scans can be used to see if the individuals show characteristic patterns of activity in their brain. So it takes a scan of our brain and tries to map out where and why the particular behavior is coming out, biological reasons why it is coming out. Patterns that are related to differences in their overt behavior. Other measures are focused on hormone levels. And this brings us to the end of the chapter.